Things we say a lot in my house is, you're the boss of your body and I'm the boss of my body. So when I took my daughter in for shots when she was 2, she confidently told the nurse, I'm the boss of my body, no shots. Well, she just turned 3 and had to get a shot, so this time I thought I knew better and I warned her about it ahead of time. And as our pediatrician was coming into the room, my daughter looked at her and said, no shots, my body, my choice. I already know I'm gonna get a bunch of angry comments calling me a bad mom, but I'm telling the story anyway. We were at Starbucks and there was a trans woman barista. My daughter looked at me and said, Mama, is that a he or a she? And I initially considered explaining what trans meant, but it seemed like a lot for the middle of Starbucks. So instead I said, why don't we ask what their pronouns are? She asked how. So I said, I would say, hi, I'm Michelle. My pronouns are she, her. What are your pronouns? And then my daughter did the same. And every day when I pick up my daughter from school or camp, we have a list of like 5 questions that we go through. And one of them is, hey, who had the best lunch today? Other than you, of course. And, you know, the answers are always interesting, but yesterday she made me laugh. So I asked her and she said, well, Mommy, do you know Chloe brought in oranges? I really want oranges. And I'm like, but honey, you're allergic. I can't. I was packing my daughter's lunch this morning and I realized I felt nervous. When I was a kid and my mom would pack me kimbap rice rolls, the kids would stare and say my food was weird or smelled funny. And I never had the words to discuss these feelings with my mom, so I just threw away my lunch. I found myself wondering, is chicken teriyaki smelly? Anyway, she came home from her first day of camp today and said, Mom, everyone wanted to eat my lunch.
Don't motivate your kids to comply by telling them how their behavior is emotionally affecting you. Like, don't do that, you're gonna stress mommy out. Or see, you made me lose my temper. Great, see, I was having a great mood, daddy was having a great mood, and then he had to go and do that. Like, what that's doing is it's teaching your kids that it's their job to manage your emotions.
Let's make a grazing platter for my kids. So when I was pregnant with my second child, all sorts of people told me all sorts of things that would be so hard about having 2 kids. Like they say 1 is 1 and 2 is 20. You know what they didn't tell me? They didn't tell me that one of the biggest challenges I would face as a mom of 2 would be trying to make sure that everything I serve them is exactly even. Oftentimes people ask me, why do you give your kids adult food? You know it's just easier to pour them a bowl of cereal, right? But cooking extra of what I'm eating has not only made them open to eating all sorts of new food, but also, do you really think they're going to pick cereal over lobster? Her has friends with a mom and a dad, but she also has friends with 2 moms or friends with 2 dads. It's never really been a big deal in our community, and we make it a point not to make them the other. But she did say something that really surprised me at how insightful she was. We were watching one of the many movies on Disney Plus, and she said, how come all the princesses always have 1 mom and 1 dad? Where are the princesses with 2 mommies? My daughter was so grossed out by accidentally touching our dog's poop because there was a hole in the poop bag. I've somehow turned into my own mother because I told her, poop you can wash away with soap and water. You know what's really gross? You know what you can't wash away? Meanness, selfishness, hate, racism, sexism, all of these things you can't just wash away. Poop? You know what? It happens. At least you can clean it up. Today, my 2-year-old fell asleep while I was holding her. She was holding a croissant. I kept trying to take the croissant out of her hand because she was gripping it so tightly I felt like she couldn't fully relax. But every time I would try to take it, she would wake up and grab it back. And that's when I realized I really did create a tiny version of myself. So I saw this TikTok where somebody said to paint rocks to make them look like strawberries and put them near your strawberry plants to confuse the birds so they don't eat your strawberries. So yesterday, my daughters and I spent the day finding and painting rocks. Today I came downstairs and all the rocks were in the garbage. So I asked my daughter why she threw away the rocks. She said to me, Mommy, I know you care about your strawberries, but I care more about the birds and I don't want them to hurt their beaks. So we are not allowed to put these rocks in the garden. I mean, how can I argue with that? Let's make a grazing platter for my kids. When my daughter started school, they had a little chart by the door. It had 4 pictures on it. People hugging, giving each other high fives, waving, or doing nothing. These were the 4 options for how they could enter the classroom, and the kids would point at their option each day as to how they would greet their teachers. You may think, wow, do nothing? That's rude. But actually, the teachers explained that kids can be shy or uncomfortable, and giving them the space to navigate first is so much better than force. We were leaving the gym yesterday, and my kids were fighting over who got to open the door, literally, and not regular fighting, like screaming at each other. So I sighed really heavily, not realizing there was someone behind me. It was an older mom, and she came up to me and said, I remember this phase. It ends and soon they won't even want to come with you, but they have wine in the cafe. We were at the park and a bigger kid was trying to pressure my 2-year-old to go down the big slide. She looked at me and I could see that she didn't want to, so I said to the kid, please don't pressure her. She will go down when she's ready. But actually my first instinct was to tell my daughter to go down and get out of the way, and I stopped myself because I wanted her to know that she has a voice and her feelings matter to me. And while she didn't know what to say in that situation, now she does. Some of my favorite memories from childhood are from days when my mom thought she was failing. There was a night I remember when my dad was working really late, and I remember my mom came home from work and just looked so beat. Instead of making dinner, she actually let us have milk and cereal for breakfast, and she felt so bad about it. But to me and my brothers, it was the best thing ever. My husband has a friend who he calls his second dad, and he's been in our lives for a long time, but he did something that made me never bring my daughters around him again. When my daughter was 2.5, we were over his house and he was holding her, and he had friends over, and he was telling his friend, another man in his 70s, that my daughter was way heavier than he expected. As if a 2.5-year-old can't comprehend that, but that wasn't the worst part. He then handed my daughter over into the other man's arms, a man she did not know, and said, "See how heavy?" I ran over immediately and said, "She's not an object." I have a rule I've never told my children. If one of them ever asks me to take a picture, I will always say yes no matter how I look or feel. When they show me this picture, I always say, "I love me," or "I'm so pretty." I don't talk negatively about my looks around my kids. Even with 30 pounds of pregnancy and breastfeeding weight, I will not speak negatively about my body. Choosing to not avoid a camera, mirror, or the spotlight is an extension of this. After 6 years of being kind to myself for the sake of my children, I've learned the secret. It becomes less of an act, and it becomes your reality. Racism doesn't start with the big things. It doesn't start with beating up an elderly Asian man on the subway or shooting up Asian businesses. It starts with the little things, making fun of your Asian snacks, asking where someone is from before learning their name, pulling back your eyes, calling someone Ling Ling. We need to speak up and speak out because the little things have turned into big things. I know it seems like a lot of extra work to use all these little containers, but actually it serves a purpose. Instead of having snack time, I put these out and they can pick up 1 container, 2 containers as they go. It empowers them to listen to their bodies when they're hungry, and it also shows them that the food will always be there, so they don't need to rush. Let's pack my kids' lunch. When my kids get really angry or emotional, I generally try to sit with them and comfort them in any way I can. This morning, my daughter was really upset, so I sat down next to her and I asked her, "Hey, do you want to snuggle or do you want to talk?" And she said, "Mom, none of that stuff's going to help. But you know what would help? A new outfit." Another Saturday morning, another extra breakfast for my kids. We taught our kids the correct words for their anatomy, like penis and vagina, instead of using the cutesy words. Anyway, it kind of backfired on me the other day. I was in the bathroom at Target with my daughter, and she looked at me and said, "Wow, Mom, you have a huge vagina." Let's make a grazing platter for my kids. When I was growing up, people would talk about food as good for you or bad for you. It caused me to have such a strange relationship with food as I was growing up, which is why with my kids, we don't talk about good or bad. We talk about full of vitamin C or really colorful. Another Saturday morning, another breakfast for my kids. This morning we're having soba noodles with some thinly sliced cucumber and egg. I also added some peppers, strawberries, and edamame on the side for them to have something else to munch on. So yummy, so healthy.